How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? It's Christian with Liberty After Dark, coming at you with a pre-recorded show this time. We're doing things a little bit different, just so that you guys know. This is gonna be recorded as if it were live, so that I can spend less time editing it, and that you guys can keep the same feel as if you're watching a live show. It's gonna be premiered on Saturday, just like a normal average Liberty After Dark episode would. And it's also going to be put into a podcast, just like a normal Liberty After Dark episode. I can't guarantee it's going to be as long because I kind of get bored of talking to myself after so long. I've done it before. We can do it this time. But I recorded about 15 minutes worth, and it turned out that my microphone wasn't on, so I didn't have a live chat to tell me, hey, idiot, fix your microphone. So, I've already missed you guys. I wish you were here. Uh, it's just part of the game. It's just part of the game. So, we have all sorts of cool things to talk about. And, I was going to talk about the impeachment because, to be honest, I didn't have any idea for what to do for this week's episode. We're going to be talking about rights eventually. I want to do that justice. So we're going to take some time. Let me research and do some more reading before I really just give like my definition on like what are rights, because that's a pretty huge idea. I want to make sure that I've got it really down in a way that makes sense and is easy to present. So that's that. But we are at an interesting point in the history of the United States of America. And I'm being completely hyperbolic. I was working today. I work from, not online. I work on a computer, so I've time, or I have the ability to like listen and do things while I work. And so, normally I listen to a podcast or I put on some YouTube videos and I just kind of like passively consume content while I work. Make my way through my infinite podcast library that I always seem to be behind on, or I watch some of my subscribers' YouTube videos to get an idea for what some of those people are, but only a couple of them. And today, Twitter recommended NBC broadcasting impeachment trials, and so I said, I've literally watched none of this. I feel slightly obligated to watch a little bit of it. And the next thing I knew, I was watching hours of waiting, but I just didn't kind of care because, again, I was just passively consuming content. And it was Lester Holt, who I think is overall a pretty decent guy and probably one of my least favorite commentators ever, Chuck Todd, just being like the most nihilistic, pessimistic, sarcastic. Like, I get it. I too am all of these things. But, I always say that if I met myself, I'd hate myself. I'm not saying that Chuck Todd's me, but Jesus, man, I cannot stand Chuck Todd. That guy is... he is a piece of work, let me tell you what. But that's it. That's all we're going to talk about for the rest of this show about Chuck Todd. What is up with the impeachment? Let's really quickly just kind of recap for those of you who don't know what's going on. So the House impeached Donald Trump, which means they think that the president might have done a naughty, right? So most of the time, actually never in history has this happened, has like a president been arrested for something and then put on trial for like shoplifting or whatever, whatever it may be. Never happened before, never will happen, first off. But so the House says, we think president has done these naughties. They go through the Judiciary Committee, they all vote on it, and then it gets pushed into the Senate eventually. And that's what's happened, right? So the Senate has the impeachment documents, or the act. It's in trial. All the senators have been sworn in as like members of a jury, and what's important to realize is that the jurors are also kind of a part of the defense and the prosecution. They're allowed to make statements. They're allowed to say how they're going to vote before anything starts. They could say, not, I'm acquitting no matter what, which we all knew was pretty much how it's going to go anyways. And so there's it may mirror a trial in appearance, but mechanically speaking, it is very, very different from a traditional criminal justice trial. So what we have is we've reached this point, which as of today, I just watched the voting for this, but we've reached a point to where the Democrats want to call more witnesses. Speaking just last night, John Bolton, who's alleged, apparently he's writing a book, which is going to apparently be coming out relatively soon. Which man, oh man, if you buy John Bolton's book, don't give that man a cent. I don't care, left, right, center, up, down, whatever color of the rainbow you are politically. Don't give that man a cent. All right, pirate it or something. Um, John Bolton has a couple revelations from his manuscript, and they want to interview him. The same guy who said that if he was subpoenaed, he'd sue. Now he wants to talk. Whatever, right? So the Democrats in the Senate want to pull witnesses, a couple witnesses, over to speak. And so at first the Republicans were like, okay, cool. You do that, and we're going to subpoena Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and the whistleblower. And, we'll just bring everybody who will just make this into just a total kangaroo court, just nonsense. Not technically a kangaroo court, but you know what I'm saying. And um, they were not having that. So eventually, what all of this boiled down to is that the Republicans said, "Well, we have the votes as of last night. Actually, the final person switched over. They said we have the votes. We're pushing this. No witnesses." So they all voted. No witnesses, no extra information. Everything that's been done has been done. They've got their 24 hours to deliberate. No extension by a week. So what's waiting on right now? And as of recording this, nothing has come out about the impeachment except for the fact that the UK has officially left the European Union. So we're going to talk about that after the impeachment stuff. Breaking news on my phone. And yeah, so they tonight potentially, or my guess is Wednesday, they're going to vote to acquit Donald Trump. It'll be along party lines, basically, for the most part. And I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see. So both of the articles that were brought up are really weak articles. Like, let's be honest here. Like, I'm super not fan of government, and I can sit here and say pretty confidently that what he did was like no more out of the way of like normal government evilness. So I don't really see what the pressing issue is to impeach here. The obstruction of justice charge, I think, is really the whole obstruction of justice charge is just built off of the fact of whether he abuses power, which is the first impeachment article. And for those of you who don't remember, the impeachment article for abuse of power is in relation to Trump's alleged, because remember, this is all legal, so alleged withholding of Ukrainian military aid to nudge Ukraine into performing an investigation against Hunter and Joe Biden in Ukraine, which Ukraine has been a shady place for politicians, kind of moving money between Russia and the US and making backroom deals for literally decades. Wouldn't surprise me at all if there was some shady backroom stuff going on there, but whatever. That's all going on. So, and then, like I said, if you don't believe that that is an abuse of power, which I think it's a really hard sell to say that money that we use to bribe other countries being used to bribe countries is an abuse of power, because that's really all of this stuff is. Like, again, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I don't like Donald Trump. Let's just separate ourselves from the equation. What is military aid really? It is diplomatic currency. That's it. It is just us we give you money to blow things up and you give us XYZ. Like with Saudi Arabia, it's access to oil. With Ukraine, I'm assuming it's access to them not being Russian mostly. Um, so yeah, I mean that's pretty much what we got going on there. And I don't I first off I know for a fact this is not the first time something like this has ever happened ever, period, end of story. But I don't see how this is any worse per se than us rigging the Israeli elections in what was it 2015, 2016, whatever that was. I don't see how this is any worse than that. It's in influencing the national security of one of our allies, as you would say, for individual political expediency. And you could say that it was, in the case of the administration that did the Israeli voting fraud, you could say that it was for, a group's political expediency, but that doesn't change the fact that it was the executive branch and who's in charge of that and therefore who's responsible for that. Well, there you go. Um, Again, I'm not going to dwell too long on that particular part of this issue, but I think it's a hard sell to say that it's an abuse of power. Was it a douche move? 100%. Everything the guy does is a douche move. But I mean, the office existing is an abuse of power. So maybe you're talking to the wrong guy here. Maybe you're talking. If you want to talk about what's an abuse of power in terms of the presidency, you should find someone who likes a little bit of the presidency instead of none of them. Because, like I said, every executive order the guy puts out is an abuse of power. I don't care if the piece of paper that grants him his authority that none of us have signed or consented to um, has any bearing on my interpretation of all this. So, what's going to happen now, like I said, is they'll eventually motion to vote to acquit. Whether that is immediately or whether that's in the next week, really. Again, I'm expecting it to be Wednesday. Really, is when it acquits, or when they move to acquit. I'm sorry. And what's I think going to be most important to keep in mind when all of this is going on is how this is going to be used in the future. So again, let's we could talk all day and night about the nuances of each side and their answer. Trump's getting acquitted. It doesn't matter, really. Like it doesn't matter. Let's just be honest with each other here. Uh, and so now that we have reached that conclusion and we have accepted the fact that Donald Trump is not being impeached for this, pretty much under any circumstances, what's going to be interesting is to see how this is used in the future. Because this won't be the last time a president is impeached. It's not like it's the first time in American history. It's not even the first time in modern American history. There have been two others before this in modern American history. And when we look back at those proceedings, we see month-long trials. We see, I think it's like an average of 30 witnesses at the Senate hearings, and it's an event, and they take months. And this could be, I think, one of the shortest, if not the shortest. Again, I don't know specifics for every single one, and I don't know which ones include the House and the Judiciary Committee. I don't think any of them do, honestly, for the totals. But I know Clinton's was months. And a really interesting, just fun history fact: a lot of the reason it took so long was because a lot of the senators didn't want to like get themselves involved in like sexually divisive topics and get put their opinion out on the president's private sexual doings. So I think that's just really funny looking back historically. I think it'd be totally different if it happened today, or if it would even go that far today, which I don't really think it will. I mean, I think that that was a whole thing in itself too. But now we have to. We'll the next time a president is impeached, they're going to look back and they're going to say, well, let's look at the Donald Trump proceedings. Okay, they didn't bring any additional witnesses to the actual Senate hearing. They didn't bring any additional evidence and documents. When they did, it was like breaking stuff that day, and they tried to subpoena over it people who had not been subpoenaed yet, which I also don't, I need to look that up, but I don't know if that's happened before either. But maybe that's just a product of living in the information age. When John Bolton 1 second is telling you he's going to sue if you subpoena him, and the next second he says, "Oh man, I'm willing to talk to anybody, and in fact, I'm going to write a book about all this." um, it's just the nature of the world we live in, I suppose. And it's when I've been really cynical about the whole impeachment thing. Because you know how I am. I mean, I get upset when the government wastes my time and money, which they are really, really good at. And honestly, this is all kind of fun if you just look at it for what it is. Again, the political theater of it all. From the perspective of a voluntarist, it's infuriating. It's frustrating. The idea of Republicans pushing this unitary executive theory through their arguments that the president can essentially do no wrong ever is such not only garbage but so dangerous. I was talking to somebody about this a few weeks ago. One thing I will give Democrats is that I've never seen a Democrat try to push the unitary executive theory. They just do things and then just say like, "What? No, what? This is totally acceptable. What are you talking about?" Republicans will, I don't know, start wars in the Middle East over oil, or do whatever, and then they'll say like, "Well, I'm basically a god. I can do whatever I want." So, I've always found that to be really funny. I don't necessarily think that it's a very flattering position to be in as someone who would be a Republican. I didn't even like it when I was a constitutionalist Republican. Just remembering the days of Bush and Cheney and their unitary executive theories. I mean, Jesus. I mean, that's gross stuff right there. And really, I mean, he's talking, the presidential privilege. We have all these different facets of things that come together to create this unitary executive theory. But really, I mean, let's be honest here. That's what the majority of the president's council was pushing, was this idea of a unitary executive above these particular normal standards by which you would hold other people. This is the president. As far as one of the Democratic, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Nadler, made an argument that I think has a bit of logical consistency to it, that I think is something that some Republicans probably just blew it off, but I think is interesting to look at nonetheless. And he basically said, under the justification that the majority of the Republican defenses have given, that the president is to some extent above what has happened, because it is in the best interest of the United States of America. He said if a president wanted to meddle in elections like very blatantly, but did so willingly in what he truly believed to be the best interests of America, that would uphold under their logic. And I was kind of like, wow, like that is a scary idea, but it's totally true. Now, obviously, they would rebuke this. They'd be like, "Oh, we would never let ballot stuffing slide. That's right out." But it just shows that it's not a concrete standard. So both sides have tons of holes in their arguments. The actual articles of impeachment are dubious at best. The Republican arguments for them are total, utter garbage. This should really be as simple as like they should just stick to the constitutionality of this. There's the whole fact that presidential privilege and the whole fact that any mention of a whispering of ideas of coming out of a unitary executive theory is just goes to show you that these people are just totally out of left field with the majority of what has gone on with the impeachment trials. So, it was fun. I was kind of hoping that while I was recording this, I'd get some update of like, yeah, Trump was acquitted, because I think that'd be really cool to break here. But, Yeah, so let's talk about the UK for a second. Whoa, I did not see that coming. When I was planning on doing this, I was just going to talk about the impeachment for maybe 30 minutes and call it a day. But so after 3 years now, the UK has officially left the European Union. So I think and someone's going to have to correct me on this in the comments whenever this video comes out cuz I think some of the nuance of this uh I'm not very fully in tuned on, but there is definitely I believe that they were trying to push for provisions for like travel and stuff like that still because they wanted access of travel through the European Union. They just wanted to be separate from the legislation. Basically, they didn't really mind being associated with the European Union because you know how Europe is. It's a very tight knit group. Even Great Britain, who's tried to separate themselves, France, Great Britain, Europe, all of the Nordic countries, they're all very closely connected trade wise, energy wise, politically. NATO as a whole pretty much makes them all one big military unit. Um, and so they have tons of influence in the UN as well. The European bloc, a lot of them are in the G8. I mean, it's a very powerful region, and you want to stay connected to that in some way. But I think it's great. I didn't think they were gonna do it, honestly. After the memorandum passed, which blew my mind. That was crazy, and it stalled for like a year. After that year, I was like, this is never gonna happen. But they got um, balding Donald Trump in their prime minister seat after what's her face left, and by God, they made it happen. I thought after she left too, I was like, that's it. Like, there's no way. Boris Johnson is his name, by the way. Uh, and they did it. Wow, really, honestly. I mean, again, this is all the political theater. I think it's completely illegitimate. The EU was illegitimate. Britain's claim to be able to influence all of these people, and now they're going to be doing their own tariffs and whatnot with the EU, and it's a big mess. I'm not going to get into all that. That's obviously illegitimate, blah, voluntarist disclaimer here. Again, just historically speaking, this will be a really interesting day. Um, this day, January 31st, 2020, is a really interesting day. This week will be one. Depending on who wins the Super Bowl and the president's address tomorrow, actually, this will be a really interesting week historically. I think it's one that will get called back on because how much it will affect the average British citizen is probably not that large, but I can't help but be interested to see what the future now holds for Great Britain as the EU and them fully, kind of sever the cord. The bird leaves the nest, as one might say, and the the whole the whole nuances of their relation moving forward. I don't know if either of them are really ready for it. The EU is about to go through a lot of changes too. Angela Merkel is pretty much has said that she's not going to run again. Last I checked, that could have changed since then. So again, correct me if I'm wrong. But it's there's a lot of changes happening. I'm pretty certain that after this impeachment nonsense, we're gonna get Donald Trump Part Two, Electric Boogaloo. I think it's all but voted. Basically, I think it's all but tallied up at this point. And a month ago I might have said you were crazy, but after watching this impeachment trial, seeing how much people have rallied around Donald Trump and watching something we haven't even talked about on the show yet because we've been kind of staying away from politics lately, the whole Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders just eating each other alive. Um, I mean, it's kind of been a meme for God, what is it now? The last couple years of like, oh, the left is eating itself. But they're in a position to where it's a tough uphill battle. They're going to do the same thing they did last time. One of their most popular candidates, it's going to come down to two people. They're both going to be extremely popular, divisive candidates. One of them is going to capitulate and support the other, and then they'll lose and they'll blame it on, oh, we should have put this person forward. Even I do that. I say, if Bernie Sanders had been the presidential nominee, he might have been president of the United States of America. When I saw that bird land on his podium, I was just kind of like, oh, this is it. next president, 45, right here. Yeah, it didn't happen because the DNCs, they're a bunch of morons, and I think they still are. So, not suggesting that part's going to change at all. I just think it's going to be really interesting. I'm going to enjoy covering it. I've decided that we're going to get back into some political coverage. We're going to be talking about the debates again. We're going to talk about, especially when the presidential debates happen, like after the nominee has been found for the Democratic Party. But we'll probably also cover this next Democratic debate. We haven't done those in a few months, so it'll be really interesting in Vegas to see if anything's changed. I think it's going to get a little more spicy. But, as the debates go on, eventually they're going to have to come up with a nominee. And when they do, you bet your bottom dollar we will be covering the presidential debates. We only have 11 months until we vote or don't vote or whatever you do. I don't particularly hate, Spooner's defensive voting, whatever. I don't see myself voting for anybody. I might put in, coronavirus 2020 in my vote instead. But yeah, the first person contacted the coronavirus actually also happened today in the United States. By the way, not China. It's kind of like everywhere. Delta also today cut off flights to China. They're just not flying. They're like, nope, this is way too risky. We're not doing this whole like causing an epidemic thing. So they stopped that. And I think this is, like I said, it's just a really interesting time to be alive. Man, wow, I did not expect any of this stuff to really happen today. I mean, the vote for the impeachment thing, we all knew that was coming. That was just sort of an inevitability as far as there's literally no way that Donald Trump was getting or was going to get indicted. There's literally no way. He was getting acquitted one way or another. Um, I'm just trying to imagine what would have had to happen in a universe where I was talking about this earlier, and I think I might. Oh, I brought it up. I think the first time I recorded, but looking at how just 2 years ago, how divided the Republican Party was. Not to suggest that it isn't now. It definitely is. I mean, look at um, Mitt Romney, for example, Rubio, uh, a couple other guys. This, they're not all on the Trump bandwagon, but it is dramatically less. He has a much tighter grasp on the party than he did just a few years ago, which, I mean, I guess that's kind of expected. Um, I'm trying to pinpoint when it actually happened, but it felt like, those first 2 years, whenever just Trump had the whole world basically, but he couldn't get anything done because none of the Republicans supported him. They had the House, they had the Senate, and they couldn't pass a piece of legislation to save their lives. But hey, I guess that's just the way the cookie crumbles again. I'm honestly kind of glad that they couldn't get anything done, but it is, from their perspective, one heck of a screw up for them to let that opportunity slide, and I don't think they'll ever live it down. I would be interested, though, to see if Trump wins again, if he'll have the same issues. And I really don't think he will. I think people have kind of become desensitized to Donald Trump. Actually, when I was watching the NBC news report, they were talking about like, why isn't this getting like sensationalized people coming out there? And it's because really everybody knew how this was going to end before it started. You know, that was Chuck Todd actually who said that. One of the few things I will ever agree that comes out of that man's mouth. And I was like, well, it's so true. I mean, what have I said this whole time? I didn't even really look into this. It's just Republicans control the Senate. Republicans have now rallied behind Donald Trump. They're not going to vote against Donald Trump. They're going to acquit him. We all knew this from the beginning. Nancy Pelosi didn't want to send the articles of impeachment because she knew that he was going to get acquitted. And I one of the Republican members of Donald Trump's defense was talking about how, like, we don't need to call witnesses because the Democrats said that they had a bunch of subpoenas and they dropped them right before they sent the articles to the Senate. And he said he pulled up quotes from members of the prosecution or the Democratic committee or whatever you want to call them. I don't remember the exact term off the top of my head. That basically said, like, we don't need anybody else. We have a rock solid case right here. And apparently that wasn't the case. Do I think it was the right move for them to push to the Senate? I think the right move was for them to not do this to begin with. But I guess, it was better than waiting because Nancy Pelosi was not making any friends by holding on to those articles of impeachment. Honestly, I think it would have been kind of cool historically to live during a time where a president was, like, not just impeached but actually, like, indicted. I think that would have been really interesting because, again, I don't care. It would have been Mike Pence as president, and that would have just been even more memes and fun stuff to talk about. Because I love Mike Pence memes. They're the greatest. And I just think, it would have been really interesting. But, again, I can't help but wonder when this, what goes around comes around, right? Politics swings left, right. Republicans win, Democrats win, Republicans win, Democrats win. By most measures, the Democrats look like they're going to gain more seats in the House this election season. The Iowa caucus is, I think, this weekend. They vote in the Iowa caucus, which, wow, that's crazy. But I think it's definitely going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting. We are at a unique point in history. January 31st, 2020 is a big, this week, the week of the math, 27th is a big week. It really is. The UK left the European Union. The United States voted to not bring witnesses on Donald Trump's impeachment trial. And maybe, they could go till, 12, I think, is when they have to cut off. And nothing yet. No more news as far as I can tell. But they could vote today to drop to acquit Donald Trump of the impeachment articles. And I think, that'd be crazy. And again, the State of the Union address will cover that. So I think that's pretty much all I've got to talk about. I really just wanted to do 30 some odd minutes of conversation, give you guys some stuff to listen to in lieu of me, and put some stuff up on the podcast. But yeah, I appreciate you guys coming and listening to this, checking it out. If you agreed, disagreed, or just enjoyed listening to me ramble on about modern politics, go ahead, either like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or rate us on your favorite podcast provider. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you check out the Facebook page over at Liberty After Dark on Facebook. We have a Patreon as well. If you enjoyed the show, we're just trying to break even in costs. So $1 is 100% getting us there. Just a couple more dollars, actually, and we'll be there. So that's cool. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I don't think I have anything else for you. So take it easy.